So, we kind of have another little break here for just a second, but the reality, we were talking about Mr. and Mrs. Howes leaving their son Samuel, and he was basically 3 years of age, and they had to totally surrender any feelings and rights that he was their son. So it wasn't that they could just try to come back to him, but they realized it was a great price, and it was a great struggle. He struggled from some ways, and the devil was accusing him, "You're so mean, making your wife go through this." The wife thinking, "Wow, I'm giving up my son." But the way she came through, the way Mrs. Howes came into victory was when she just laid it out to God. She went out in the garden and put herself before the Father, and it was nothing but pain. Just, it was like a death, because it was such a decision to make. But God just told her to measure it by Calvary. And when she did that, it was something that touched her in such a way that, wow, if Jesus did this for me, and if people are really dying and going to hell, and this is what Jesus has asked, and he's really Lord, all the thoughts that would go through your mind, she made a decision and came through. God brought her through by showing this reality of Calvary, by showing her that reality of what Jesus Christ had done. And, it was a very, very deep experience for them. So, there's a statement in the book that says this: the Holy Spirit said to them, "You must prove to me that you love the souls of Africans who are to live for eternity more than you love your own son." And that, really puts it in a position, and that's not so that people can have a reason for being irresponsible to children. See, some people can use, their own selfishness to not be responsible and blame it on God. All right, so that's why you can't do that, because that's where our self-nature needs to be put to death, and God had already done some of that through some of these other experiences. And it just brought him to the place that it was God's will, where God was the one that led them, God was the one that guided them. So we have to be sure that we're not using God as a crutch not to be responsible or to shirk certain responsibilities. So again, those are things that God just needs to take us through. But God really said this to them and said, if you do this, then you're going to get 10,000 souls. And, it began, again, this was the early 1900s, 1914 basically. And the fact is, the world was so unreached, okay? Africa, it took them months to get there on a ship. They went, and most missionaries in those time frames when they went, they didn't expect to come back. Most of them, so many died with, fevers and various kinds of things that would attack them. And it was just an incredible moment of, you surrender everything when you do that. We can get on airplanes today, fly all over the world, stay healthy and, and have food and not have to make a lot of different even cultural changes in some settings, but we can kind of establish how we want to function and how we want to be able to relate to people. And but it was a totally different world, in those moments. So they decided that, yes, that's what we're going to do, and they proved it. And one of the things that so broke through to those Africans was the fact that they would leave their aged parents and their son to come to them to tell them this message about Jesus' salvation, and that he was telling them something that they had never heard, that if they didn't hear it and didn't believe it, and if they didn't hear it, they couldn't believe it, that they would be separated from a God for all eternity, and that they would have this punishment of hell that they would have to go into. So there was this incredible gratitude, all right? And I can't tell you how happy that Samuel Howes was that his parents would make that kind of a commitment. Because he felt the weight in his own life as he, ultimately became born again, felt to go into the ministry. His aunt and uncle that took him into their home, and he became theirs. Even they gave him their last name, okay? And so, he just became theirs. That's what they did. But it was something that was so special to him, knowing that, and he just felt, I need to go into the ministry. That's what he wanted to do. And so when his parents came back, he was being sent to a preparatory school to prepare him for Oxford. And so he would be their son, but he came back to his parents, and was a part there with them. And then upon his graduation from Oxford and learning a lot of things about faith, walking out his own life of obedience, a lot like his father had to go through, then it was just a very special time when he was able to come back and allowed him to really be able to have them and for them to have him. And they never really looked at him, I mean, as he was their son. It wasn't that they didn't know he was their son. It wasn't that he didn't know that they were his parents. But again, it was the fact that he was there because of the calling on his life. Not just that he went back to his parents, but he was there because this is the way God had worked. So some people have really confronted me sometimes after reading the book or hearing some of the times that I talk about Rees Howells. They would say, he was such a mean man. He didn't do that. He was irresponsible. He shouldn't have left his children. In fact, I had a man come in this office one day and just absolutely rebuke me, scream at me, turn red in the face, and tell me how I was ruining my own family by, looking at this man's life and the traveling that I was doing at that time, and how that Rees Howells had ruined his son's life by what he did. And of course, I'd already been making trips to the Bible College of Wales, and this guy was, you couldn't reason with this man. He was out of control. And I said, you know what? You're right. All right? I said, Samuel Howells hated his parents, absolutely despised his parents, entered into a life of ungodliness, drinking, alcohol, sexual immorality. I said he entered into all that stuff because of the fact that he felt so much rejection from his parents. And this guy he stopped. He was looking at me like, yeah, see? And then I said, how ridiculous. I said, I have never met a person that so loved his parents, so respected his parents, so has given his whole life to fulfill the vision of the Christ that God gave to his parents, that absolutely was involved in those deep intercessions. And and anyway, I went through a lot of stuff like that, but it was ridiculous because Samuel Howells so respected his mother and his father, and it was just this incredible honor. And one time I was visiting with him. In fact, he showed it to me more than once, and they have a picture of it now at the Bible College. But Samuel Howells kept it in his own room at that time. But it was a mimeographed copy of a publication that the mission agency that his parents was involved in had printed after his parents went to Africa. And it's entitled Little Samuel. That's the whole title, Little Samuel. And it's a story about them and the way that God called them and the way they laid Samuel down and the way that the life of the Africans meant more to them, the souls, to be able to go, that even if it cost them that, they were touching people that had never been touched with the gospel, who started coming. And from that, multitudes and multitudes, into millions of people now have come to Jesus Christ. Samuel Howells was so proud that he could continue to walk in that kind of obedience. And you can't walk in that as long as that man did. And from 1950 to 2004, he led these intercessions. He lived the intercessions. He had his own victories of intercessions, and he was mightily used as what his father and mother was, and it was just it was just incredible, the way that the man so honored the Christ. And I say this, I've never walked into anybody's presence that you felt so much of just the holiness of God, that God was just with him, and that he was just living to see the vision of people coming to Jesus Christ. That was his life, and that's why he trained people, and that's why he gave himself to intercession. And if the man said he was praying for someone or for you, you knew that he was. So, for these experiences, God revealed breakthroughs and showed how God opened the world and poured out his Spirit upon so many people as a result of their obediences. And it was incredible. One thing that Samuel Howells also told me was the fact that he remembered the day his parents left, which was a heart-wrenching day for the parents, and they just felt like somebody was tearing their heart out, and they were leaving part of themselves, and they were. And they did it, and they did it in obedience. But he remembers, because where his aunt and uncle lived, was they had a store downstairs and they lived in the upstairs. So he was in an upstairs, second floor story of this building. I've seen the actual building that's there, and he was there, and they stood him in a chair to look out the window as the train came by. And of course the parents knew where the house was. They were saying, "Oh, there's Mommy and Daddy," and they were, waving to one another as they were rolling away in the train. So millions of people have been touched because of these obediences and because they were willing to do what God asked them to do. And it's an amazing journey. God's looking for every one of us to further come into a relationship with Him, to where He can use us to touch people that have not yet been touched, to see the breakthroughs that are necessary and the obediences in our lives where we can become more changed into the very image of Jesus Christ. God bless you.